Many Americans have, to put it mildly, a knee-jerk reaction just to the word socialism, let alone to the concept. Yet many of these people would struggle to actually define the word. So what is socialism? What does it look like? What is the impact? And why do so many Americans fear and distrust it? Well, let's discuss. So what is socialism, and what does it look like? Well, here's part of the challenge that there is no one easy answer. Before we get too far, let me just point out that the links to the articles I've used in my research are in the description below, and those links, as well as the image credits, are at the end of the video. Also, obviously this can only be a quick summary of what is a complex concept in philosophy, so if you're interested, I recommend further research using my references here and beyond. I also plan to do further videos in the future exploring other philosophies and systems, with the next one probably being on capitalism in just a few weeks. Okay, moving on. Merriam-Webster defines socialism as, quote, any of various economic and political theories advocating collective or governmental ownership and administration of the means of production and distribution of goods, end quote. One of Wikipedia pages on the topic defines socialism as, quote, an economic system where the ways of making money, factories, offices, etc., are owned by a society as a whole, meaning the value made belongs to everyone in that society, instead of a small group of private owners. It goes on to add, socialists believe that everything in society is made by the cooperative efforts of the people, end quote. In other words, there is no such thing as the completely self-made man or woman. Even the business person who rose from rags to riches has made use of roads, utilities, services, and other infrastructure that was built and is usually maintained by public spending. In other words, taxpayer-funded, or the cooperative effort of the people, to use that term we just read on Wikipedia. In the US, the most well-known socialist at the moment is almost certainly Senator Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders defined his flavor of socialism as, quote, we must create an economy that works for all, not just the very wealthy, end quote. In the UK, there are a number of parties who fall on the socialist spectrum, including Labour, the Greens, SNP, and others. So let's talk history. Where did this philosophy come from? A gentleman named Robert Owen was one of the first to use the term socialist in his writings and publications. A Welshman by birth in 1771, Owen worked in the cotton industry in Manchester, England, before setting up a mill to test and work on his theories in Scotland, and eventually getting involved with experimental communities in the US and UK. He was shocked by the way various employers, including some of his own partners, treated their employees and the community. Working conditions were poor, to say the least. Child labor was rampant, and working-class neighborhoods were slums. His philosophy is largely a response to what he saw. Biography Online encapsulates his worldview by saying, quote, Owen was a great believer that man was shaped by his environment and surroundings. Therefore, he felt it his duty as a manager to offer education and respectable surroundings for his extended family, end quote. Owen implemented a great number of reforms in his own factories and advocated for them more broadly. This included the 8-hour workday, improved working conditions for his employees, making education available, banning the employment of children under 10, and more. He also played an instrumental role in both the trade union and cooperative movements. Of the cooperative movement, he said that, quote, workers should own the companies they worked for. The workers should then share the profits amongst themselves, end quote. Contrary to the expectations and predictions of his more traditional contemporaries, despite his benevolence and the significant investment in his employees and communities, his business in New Lanark, Scotland, remained profitable and promoted improved standard of goods produced. It was, in my understanding, the experimental communities later and his interest in spiritualism that discredited Owen. In one of the American communities, for example, he invested and then lost 80% of his wealth. He died in 1858. Even only looking at the life and career of Robert Owen, however, we see varying models of how socialism looked and worked. His core philosophy stayed consistent, but the application of that evolved from the mill he operated in Scotland to the experimental communities he helped found and those he inspired, to the trade union and cooperative movements. He was followed, of course, by many others. Most people associate socialism with Karl Marx, who advocated a more revolutionary approach to socialism, and Friedrich Engels. Marx, in particular, dismissed Robert Owen as a utopianist. In modern times, we have a number of socialist movements, and these can be broadly lumped into two groups. And let me emphasize, I am oversimplifying here. If you're interested, please research the topic to get a better understanding. On one hand, we have social democracy, which Wikipedia defines as, quote, a political, social, and economic ideology that supports economic and social interventions to promote social justice within the framework of a capitalist economy, end quote. Then there is democratic socialism, which, despite the similar name and some overlapping concepts, has an additional focus on systemically transforming the economy, as it believes capitalism is not compatible with concepts of liberty, equality, and solidarity. So both of these systems believe in a democratically elected government, a robust welfare state or redistribution of wealth, and efforts to curb inequality, oppression, and poverty. Social democrats, however, believe that while key industries are owned by the public, private ownership is still retained, albeit regulated to ensure ethical behavior, honest marketing, proper working conditions for employees, and so forth. And all of this happens within the framework of the capitalist economy. Democratic socialism, however, at least implies that most or all business is owned and are managed by the government, and says that capitalism is not compatible with democracy. One reason that Americans fear and distrust socialism is because they confuse it with communism and think it's the same thing. But these are two very different ideologies. It is true that Marx and Engels use the terms interchangeably, and that communism incorporates some elements of socialism. Early Soviet leader Lenin also attributed the basis of communism to Marx and Engels. But communism, as it came to be understood in the 20th century, and in the USSR and China and others, relies on a heavily centralized economy and authoritarian government. To paraphrase one source, in socialism, the people themselves decide how the economy should work, through their elected councils or other means. It is a liberal system, in the classic sense, not in the way the term is used in the US. In communism, a single central party controls the economy, and the masses don't have a voice. This is a conservative system. Again, we're not using this term in the way that is politically used right now in the US and UK, but in the more classic sense of that term. So to sum up, in communism as practiced in the USSR, it was not democratic. The theory was that wealth would be shared by the masses based on need, although my understanding is that no communist movement ever achieved that. All industry and business was owned and managed by the state, with the theoretical objective is a society that is not divided into various classes, and to accomplish this, capitalism must be totally destroyed. To summarize the difference between socialism and communists, after World War II, the Socialist International's Frankfurt Declaration of 1951 explained the difference and denounced Bolshevik, i.e. Soviet, communism. Quote, where socialists aim to achieve freedom and justice by removing the exploitation which divides men under capitalism, communists seek to sharpen those class divisions only in order to establish the dictatorship of a single party. End quote. Back to one of our original questions. What does socialism look like? To be honest, if you live in either the UK or the US, or many other countries, you've already seen it and experienced it. In the UK, we have the National Health Service, a government-run health system that ensures you can get medical care when sick or injured without going bankrupt. Similar systems exist in other developed countries. Obviously not in the US. But even in the US, there are a number of socialist systems. Social Security and Medicare, which provide income assistance and health care for seniors, with Medicare itself being socialized medicine, quote unquote. There's also unemployment insurance, which provides an income if you lose your job. Publicly funded police, fire, and emergency services that don't operate on some sort of fee-for-service or insurance model. Public education and public libraries, and that list goes on and on. So where does all this leave us now? As memories of the Cold War fade, at least the old Cold War, even in the US, we've seen a weakening, at least, of that old knee-jerk reaction to socialism, especially among younger people. Many doubted that Bernie Sanders would gain any traction in his bid for the Democratic Party nomination in 2016. But while he did not win the nomination in the end, he drew substantial support. Why? People are growing increasingly dissatisfied with the status quo. Middle-class workers are frustrated by years of stagnant wages. People are leaving college now deeply in debt, and effectively indentured for decades. People are living in poverty who see no real way out. Citizens see politicians voting for what makes their big pocket donors the happiest, instead of what actually would benefit the constituents who voted for them. Patriots see wars being fought in their name, generating billions and billions for a few select contractors, usually with government connections. While people, honest, hardworking people living in major American cities, cannot get clean water or have to live in rat-infested hovels. Income inequality has skyrocketed since the deification of trickle-down economics and the greed is good mentality in the 1980s, leaving many with a distaste for the unrestrained capitalism that is the hallmark of our age. So, is that age ending? Are we moving to a new paradigm? Only time will tell. I hope you found today's video interesting and informative. If so, please remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share. And remember, be good. And if you can't be good, be wicked well.